Let's first put this into context. How big is China for the gaming industry globally?
Yeah, so I mean, we're looking at a $125 billion market globally. China and the U.S. maintain roughly half of that market, which isn't surprising given just population distributions. But, you know, another telling fact is as a percentage of GDP, most countries' video gaming is around 0.2%. China is 0.49%. So, you know, pretty significant portion of GDP. These are also huge numbers for the industry generally.
So the government is trying to implement a 1-hour rule for parents to impose on their children of the amount of time a child can sit in front of a screen per day. Is that realistic, even in China?
Yeah, even in it sounds like something coming out of my childhood. But China has done it in the past. There have been regulations on. There's a game, Honor of Kings, where there have been time limitations imposed on underage users. So it's possible. Some of the other regulations that they're looking at are just making the games themselves slightly less addictive. I mean, we in the U.S. have also looked at similar addiction triggering features in games like random generation of various rewards, things like that. But time limitations are certainly something that you can link to a user account and the age of the users. And
right, it's something that the game makers could actually do, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. And I think that those are some of the regulations that China is balancing, is how much do you put it on the user or the family versus what are the game makers able to build into the back end of some of these software platforms.
We spoke to the CEO of Razer, a gaming company in China, for their reaction to these regulations. Take a listen to what he had to say.
We don't have any specific concerns, given that the Chinese market is still a huge market, and many of the games over there are doing very, very well. I think engagement with the gamers is still very, very high, and I think it's a matter of time, I think, for the entertainment sector to continue growing over there in China.
China still has the benefit of the sheer size of the population. I mean, how much is this really going to hurt game makers?
Yeah, I mean, they have the benefit of the sheer size. He talked about entertainment spending. Video gaming is roughly 12.1% of entertainment spending. It's projected to increase to 14. The video game market right now is about 32 billion in China. That's looking to expand up to 60 billion. So, you know, when you think about market impact and some of the multiples moving forward, I think the concern is the growth case. Is do these restrictions limit the time frame with which the market expands? I don't think there's any doubt that the market is going to continue to grow. The question is just kind of what rate the revenues will grow, and you know how long people are able to engage with the games, which translates into advertising dollars and revenue generally.
From a political perspective, does it appear that China can regulate its children the same way the country has been able to regulate, sort of middle-aged people? I mean, the one-child policy was in effect for decades. That is now gone. We still see, of course, censorship on search engines and social networks. But that said, is the younger generation of China going to respond as the previous ones have?
Yeah, I mean, it's yet to be seen. I mean, especially in this day and age where, the youth are always kind of looking for ways to get around the regulations that are implemented. And sure, if you have a time limit reg, there are going to be ways to work around that or sign up for multiple user IDs, things like that. So we'll see what the response level is too. But, I think that China is sensitive to both the cultural protectionism, but they're also recognizing that there's opportunity here and revenue growth and some significant business interests as well. So if they get the regulations right, there will be a balance there, and I think that we'll kind of see a little bit of both being served. And you'll always get people on the tail end who are avoiding the regs altogether. So we'll see what they come out with, what eventually gets implemented, and then how effective that is in either curtailing or growing.
It's fascinating, given that the Chinese government has done so much to boost its own domestic companies, blocking Facebook, pushing Google out of the country, blocking Twitter, and at the same time, it's helped companies like Tencent and Alibaba and Baidu thrive without competition. And this seems to be taking quite the opposite approach.
Yeah, it's in the short term. I think it seems to be blowing the other way, and I think that the hope is that China gets the regulations correct on the front end. We've seen some similar regulatory regimes in, say, intellectual property for a long time. China wasn't a big protector. You know, they've gotten hammered recently in the trade discussions, but at the same time, they're kind of setting up courts that might implement some more protectionist measures, things like that. So I think you're seeing a little bit of the scales balance in the long term. So setting up a regime now that might cause some short-term pain for hopefully long-term gain.